All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining this morning, or whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our fourth and last session of our BITS Fall 2023 Research Transparency and Reproducibility Training Series. I think all of you have been with us before in some earlier sessions, so I won't go through the entire BITS introduction again, but I'm really excited about today's session. We will have our project scientist, Fernando Hoces de la Guardia, again, presenting on the social science reproduction platform, the SSRP, as well as Leo Dai, who is the SSPP social science prediction platform research assistant. So both of them will be going through the context and motivation and sort of an overview of our platforms, as well as a demo of how to use it and how it can help in your research and how it will advance our open science goals more broadly. So if you have questions throughout, as always, please feel free to interrupt, or you can use the chat and I will relay the questions to our presenters between slides or at a point where it makes sense. And yeah, please just feel free to ask questions. If you have questions, I'm sure other people do as well. So we really encourage the engagement in these sessions. So without further ado, I'll just turn it over to Fernando to kick us off with the SSRP today. Oh, Fernando, I can't actually hear you. Can others hear? Maybe it's a me issue.
Let me just remove the speaker.
That's perfect. Now I can hear you.
Close the door here. Okay.
Great. Thanks.
Yes. So thank you very much for joining us on this last version of the online RT2. And I just want to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about a tool that could help you increase the transparency of your work and of others, the social science reproduction platform. This is a motivation that I have shared already with you on a previous presentation. If you've seen it, if you were there, fine. If you were not there, the key idea is that the manuscript is just, we need to think of the manuscript of a research as the advertisement part of the scholarly output, and the bulk of the scholarly output is the entire software development environment and complete set of instructions that generate the figures and output that goes into the paper. So, and this is known as the Clairvaux principle. The Clairvaux principle is typically discussed or present in a context of pedagogy. So, for example, when I was doing this presentation on version control software a few weeks ago, this is a standard motivation. It's also used to discuss how we can think this way to switch to a more incremental knowledge generation mindset. But one dimension that I want to propose or explore an additional dimension of the Clairvaux principle is that it could have some positive effects on diversity, equity, and inclusion. What I mean by this is that when we think of accessing the paper, the main barrier before and still would be something like a gated paper that we need to pay for. So that's a barrier that we need to reduce, and there's progress in the open access world. But now if you think of accessing the entire scholarly output, meaning the data sets and the code, until very recently, the only way that you can access that it was if you either had the right connections for people to give you the access to the data set or the code, or if you grew up so like in the culture that where you would know how to ask for this with the sort of like quote unquote appropriate politeness. For example, for non-native English speakers like me and others, could be pretty challenging to think of, oh, how can ask this, how can I request this data set in a polite way, or these materials in a polite way to access the data and to access the knowledge. So if we think of computational reproducibility as a starting point, we reduce this barrier. When we prioritize computational reproducibility from the start, we don't put the burden in the researcher who's trying to reproduce. We put the burden on the researcher who's generating the work. So that's a different angle that I wanted to share with you as a motivation for this. I have two more motivations for computational reproducibility. And please jump in whenever you want. A second motivation, it's this so-called reproducibility crisis, in the sense that people in different social sciences have tried to either replicate on the left, meaning using the same method over a different but comparable sample, trying to obtain the same results, or they have tried to reproduce, meaning that they have tried to, using the same data and the same methods, ideally the same code, seeing how much of the original results we can recover. And as we see here, for replication, the rates range from like 30% to 60% or something like that. And there's a debate of whether or not how to think about this, whether we should aim for 100% or something like that. But in the right, the evidence for economics in terms of reproducibility, it shows that the rates range from basically 40 something percent to 14%. And this is on the right, we should expect to obtain the same result all the time. We should be able to access the code, access the data, and get the same result that we see in the paper. So that this is a second motivation. And a third motivation, particularly for either the instructors or the students in the room, it would be that we think that every year, every semester, hundreds of students around the world generate valuable knowledge that disappears. What do I mean by this? So in a typical graduate course of labor economics, social psychology, or something like that, a typical assignment consists on reproducing the results of a paper and maybe testing the robustness of the results. So the assignment might take the entire semester, might take a couple of weeks, but it will go on something like this. So first, the student will scope the paper. What do we mean by this? They will verify that the paper has data and has code. And just the action of verifying that the paper, either in the journal or on the author's website or somewhere else, there is a reproduction package, that's valuable knowledge, knowing that, the existence of that. So that's knowledge that's generated. Then they might assess, they will assess either a fraction or the entire paper. And we'll say this paper, it's completely reproducible, somewhat reproducible, not reproducible at all. Again, new knowledge is generated by students everywhere around the world. They might improve the package. They might fix paths. They might update libraries. They might fix some bugs. They might do all sorts of things. And again, this is knowledge. And finally, they could test the robustness of the results to additional specifications. They might add some covariates. They might subset the sample. They might change some methodologies, and they could find that the results don't change, or they could find that the results change. In either way, the likelihood that this knowledge that they learn about how much more robust or how less robust the paper is, it is unlikely that they will see the light of day, and particularly it's more likely they will see the light of day if they find that the results change. So all this knowledge, basically, as I said, at least a few hundreds of students around the globe, probably in the low thousands, every semester do this. And when the semester ends, there's a presentation, there's a report, but this report goes directly into the file drawer of knowledge, and nobody else can see it. and basically it doesn't go disseminated. There are several problems with this. In addition to losing this knowledge, the language across these exercises is non-standard. To this day, as you saw in the beginning, I need to clarify what do I mean by a reproduction or replication, so we're all on the same page. But there are more nuances on the language that need to be clarified. There are some attempts to record this in a full paper, but as I was going through the exercise, it should be somewhat clear that it's not always going to fit into a formal paper. It better fits as a report or as a homework assignment. But the tragedy here is that it is knowledge, it is valuable, and we just we don't archive it properly. We don't standardize it or archive it properly. So that's where we come in as the social science reproduction platform. A little bit as a historical context, at BITS, at our closest discipline is economics, and basically we follow the history of the policies there. In 2006, there was the first data policy from the American Economic Association, where there was where it was basically for the first time the AEA requested that some data be published, but with a lot of waivers available. In 2019, there was a large modification, a substantial modification that has changed the landscape, where basically now all data and code needs to be published if you want to publish in one of the 9 AEA journals. Moreover, it has to be documented extensively, and if you have proprietary data, at least they're going to require you to publish all code, including the cleaning code. What does that mean for us is that after 2019, we should expect higher computational reproducibility, not before that, and we should have a way to basically assess these degrees of computational reproducibility. Another element that we try to bring to the table is that we want to move a little bit away from binary judgments. We understand that early career researchers have incentives to emphasize unsuccessful reproductions. We also understand that original, more senior authors have a position of power where they can deter in-depth reproductions, critical in-depth reproductions for early career researchers. And also we understand that the media has this tendency to focus on eye-catching headlines. So we don't want to say something along the lines of paper X is reproducible or irreproducible. We do want to say something closer to a specific result as a level of reproducibility that has been uncovered by several reproduction attempts. And also we have improved or we can record how this reproducibility has been improved over time. And with that, basically, we build this ACARE framework, the Accelerating Computational Reproducibility Framework, where we try to move a little bit away from the idea of the paper, here very much influenced by a project named SCORE. And don't think of the paper as the unit to reproduce. Think of a claim. A paper might contain different scientific claims that are supported by tables or figures called display items. And in each figure or table, we might find a specific specification that's the target of our reproduction. So we want to guide the reproducers to identify what is that they're after. And we want to standardize as much the language of what it's being done here. And this was one of the key challenges of this exercise. So standardizing a lot of language here and just putting a fraction of the definitions that we had to basically come out with some standardized definition. Let me highlight a few here. So computational reproduction, we propose a nuanced definition that moves in a gradient, not on a 0-1. We strongly separate from this idea of replication. We don't talk much about replication because we want to distinguish between the two of them. A package that contains all the materials, we had to put a name on it, so it's the reproduction package. And when assessing reproducibility, also we need to make a difference between access to the raw data. What do we mean by raw data? And access to analysis data. What do we mean by analysis data? And there are other things like a candidate paper or declared paper that will become clear in terms of definitions as I progress with the demo. So these were basically the motivation for us and the initial challenges. And with that, we built the social science reproduction platform. And if you want, you can click on it right now. Let me put I don't know if the link, maybe I copy it like this. I'll put it here. Yeah. This is the social science reproduction platform where you can see the reproductions that others have done, and you can create your own reproduction in a standardized way. The target audiences here that we have in mind are students around the world that are taking courses, and they want to basically standardize and archive the knowledge that they have generated. But also, potentially, we want to think that a good audience here would be any researchers who wants to conduct a reproduction at the beginning of their research project, during their research project, and also an audience that we aspire to attract would be the data editors or journals. Basically, it would be fantastic if journals one day could say, okay, here's the paper. We don't have the resources to reproduce it, but at least go and look in the social science reproduction platform and build your own reproduction and link it back to our journal. And we maybe give some incentives or something like that to encourage people to do that. And how would you do a reproduction? If we say that you go and start a reproduction, the reproduction here, the demo would be a bit more of a high-level demo. We break the reproduction into 5 stages. Again, with this idea of standardizing and guiding the user as much as possible. So in the first stage, you will select a paper. We think that this is an important self-contained stage that we want to distinguish, where you either are assigned a paper or think of a paper and go check it out very quickly, go to a journal. You will find a digital object identifier, a permanent record locator of the paper, and you will also verify if there is a reproduction package. In this case, this link called dataset here. So just by doing this, you're in a sense generating knowledge. You're saying there is a reproduction package. You can think of the alternative where you would go onto a paper, particularly older papers, and look at the PDF, but you will not find anything. And then you would move to another paper. We want to encourage you to take 5 minutes and say, there are no materials here. I'm just going to create a quick record in the SSRP where I'm going to say I'm abandoning this paper because there were no reproduction materials. And that's useful because that helps us understand which papers at least have some reproduction materials and which don't have any. So that would be in the first stage of selecting the paper. There's some noise. If I'm going to mute some. Okay. Okay. So where was I? Yes. So now you're going to move on. You have selected your paper. You have found a reproduction material. You move to the next stage. The next stage is when you scope the paper. You basically declare that there's a reproduction material. You move forward in the platform. Then one nice thing of the platform is that you only need to provide the digital object identifier, and it's going to pre-populate all the other details for you. Then you will answer if there's a reproduction material. And then, just then, that is an important thing. Only just then you will start reading the paper. We encourage people not to basically waste their time doing a reproduction exercise where there are no materials. They have the option of doing it if they want, but first identify that there are some materials, then move into reading the paper, and identify very clearly which section of the paper you want to reproduce, because a paper might contain hundreds of results, and you want to be very clear as to what is the result that you think is relevant. So in this example, in a famous paper here, I'm looking at the results section. In the second paragraph, I have identified a sentence that points me out to what is the main estimate of the paper in my subjective view as a reader. So it would be this elasticity of 0.169. Then you would say, okay, so this is the main result, either in the abstract, in the introduction, in this case, in the results section. You would go and say, where's the display item that supports this claim? In this case, it's in table 2. You would find that here's the main display, the main specification. You might also find other specifications that you might want to test its robustness. So you can record those too, and then you would move into in the assessment section of the platform. You would just, in your own words, record a 1 or 2 sentence summary of this claim and point out to where this estimate is in the paper, and then you will start looking at the materials. You would say, okay, now I'm gonna open the reproduction package. It has all these folders, it has all these files. Hopefully it's gonna have a README file. Down here you probably cannot see, but this is a README file. And you would open the README file, and the README file will say, if you wanna reproduce table 2, then you need to run this script, this do file or R script or something like that. Once you open that script, you might realize that it depends on other scripts, and you want to keep track of that dependency. So the platform has a feature that allows you to keep track of all those pieces. So you would enter what script depends on which inputs and outputs, and then it will generate for you this nice reproduction tree that we call it, where you can clearly see, in order to reproduce a display item, what are the pieces that you need. So then you will try to reproduce. You will try to run this thing and see if you get the same result. And once you have done that exercise, you are in a position to score the reproduction, the reproducibility of any given display item. And for that, we have provided we propose a standardized scale that goes from having no materials to being able to reproduce from the raw data, but with a middle point where you will be able to reproduce it from the analysis data, and then try to identify as much granular improvements as possible, such that we can track the progress from one point to the other. So, and now you're done assessing your display item. You can assess the entire paper, but then you would move on and you can document. This is a optional section, so you can skip this section, but you could report and archive all the improvements that you have done. So there are 3 types of improvements that we think of. One, it's a paper level improvement, where basically you can say, hey, there was this zip file that was the original reproduction package. It didn't have any README files, it wasn't so clearly organized, it was not using version control. Remember, for those who attended the training on version control, now I as a reproducer, I have created a repository, I have archived it, and here's the link. So I want to document that I improve the reproducibility of these reproduction materials by adding version control software. I can also document better the code. As a reader, I can indent it, I can add explanations, improve the naming of objects. You can do all sorts of things, and you will basically create a short record that says this is what I did and provide some examples. You can also follow, now there are all sorts of recommendations in terms of best practices for file organization, so such as it's clearer. The tier protocol is a very good example, but the AEA reproduction template also is a good one. You can rewrite the whole thing or a section of the reproduction materials in a different software, ideally open source software, so others can access it. And as another example of things that you can do, you can create a computing capsule. This idea that you don't need to download the materials. All the materials live in a computational environment that people can run from their browser, things like Binder or CodeOcean. Those are sort of ideas of paper level improvements. That maybe it's too much. Maybe it's just a two-week exercise, and you just want to record very quickly what is that you did for a specific display item. Here are just some real-life examples of what people did. So basically, they will leave a short message saying, I added raw temperature and relative humidity data. Again, think of before the SSRP, it would be very hard to leave a public record saying that you did this. You fix some bugs, fix another bug, and these are sort of like small things that people have done, but they are useful. Another thing you can do as a reproducer is that after the exercise, particularly once the last hour or day before you submit your exercise, you have become an expert on that reproduction package, and you know what are the things that can be improved, but you don't have the time. So we give you space to leave a short record of what are the things that you would suggest future reproducers, people that will come after you to improve on the reproduction materials. So here people are leaving messages, something along the lines of, these scripts are not so well organized, so they can be organized better. There are data and code that does not generate some figures. So there's some figures that are not reproducible, so it would be good to have that. There's some reproduction that requires ArcGIS. Why don't do some open software GIS translation? So those are sort of like the messages that you will leave for people to come right after you, or years after, but it will be a stable record. And finally, basically, you would record the reproducibility, the robustness of any robustness test that you might have conducted. So here you can be even all the way to an undergrad student who's just running an exercise and seeing how the code comes together. They might not have the expertise to provide a reasonable robustness test, but they could still contribute in different ways. Here, basically, as a robustness test, we think of it as any possible change in a computational choice, both in data analysis and cleaning. And we try to follow the definition of von Simonson et al. On what is a reasonable specification. A reasonable specification is going to be something that has a sensible test of the research question that is expected to be statistically valid, and it's not redundant with other specification tests. So these are the things that somebody who's more immersed in the literature or knows the methods more in detail could do. So this would be a proposed robustness check. But somebody who's not an expert, one thing that they could do is that they could increase the size of feasible robustness check, because a feasible, if your paper is not reproducible at all, if it has a level 1 of reproducibility, there's no robustness check that is possible. But as you increase the levels of reproducibility, you can document where are the key analytical choices and increase sort of the size of feasible robustness test to a point that if you get higher in reproducibility, you increase the chances of carrying out a reasonable robustness check. So in that sense, there could be two types of contributions. One, just increasing the size, identifying where in the lines in the code there are analytical choices. And then somebody can come after you and say, oh, this line, I'm going to switch it to this different choice, and I'm going to justify the different choice. And basically, at the end of the day, you will have a completed reproduction. And as I said, this is going to be a permanent record that is going to have a digital object identifier that basically you can cite, that you can put in your CV, that you can share with the original authors, with the community in general. And it's gonna, here we're looking at the summary of the reproduction exercise. It says how many claims were assessed, how many display items were assessed, how many improvements were carried out. In this case, where there were no robustness tests. Here's the summary of the claim, and here's the score of the display item in question. And here's the link to the original reproduction package and the link to the revised reproduction package. And once you scroll down here, you will see the entire reproduction where you can click in each section in a view-only mode and see what were the steps that were carried out for the reproduction. So this would constitute the entire reproduction exercise, and people can see it. What can you do with this? You can share it with authors, with instructors for a grade. You can put it in your CV, basically to demonstrate that you have achieved some level of mastery of a certain topic or a certain methodology. And you can cite it. We have created this digital object identifier to facilitate its citation. Another thing that I wanted to emphasize is that together with the platform, we have built this entire book with guidance for how to do a reproduction. And we want to promote particularly a constructive exchange between authors, original authors, and reproducers. So there's a chapter, and I'll point you out to all these materials in the last 5 minutes of the presentation. But there's a chapter in the guidelines where we walk you through, as a reproducer, different scenarios on how you might want to reach out to authors in a collegial, respectful, but not in a way that you will not feel intimidated. So we have examples of emails. So say that when there's no reproduction package whatsoever, you can take this template and say, hey, author X, I'm sending you this email where I'm trying to reproduce this paper, and here's some template language of what are you trying to do, some parts that I'm trying to emphasize. So for example, unfortunately, I was not able to locate any of these materials on your website, Dataverse, or other places. And I will record these results in the SSRP. With your permission, I will also record the materials that you might share with me, and so on. So even your cooperation, it's welcome. It's not mandatory, so you're not putting people against the wall. And like this, we have many examples. So say that they respond to you and they give you a zip file and say hey, here are the materials. And then you want to say, hey, the file that you gave me has some missing files. Here are some specific examples. I tried to do this. I built this reproduction tree, but I still cannot find this file that is mentioned in your. This script mentions this data, and I cannot find it. Can you please share those files with me? Again, trying to mediate a potentially thorny exchange such that it can be as constructive and fruitful for anybody involved in this. So that's roughly the SSRP. How would you get started? You can just create an account, and also without even creating an account, you can start looking for reproductions. You can use it as part of your class or an independent project. You can look at the guidelines that I will show you in a second, what kind of content do we have there. And also we have a discourse forum for people to have a constructive exchange saying, this is what I'm doing. Can people, do you disagree that this is my understanding of the claim, my assessment, and so help people navigate this potentially thorny space. The SSRP has been around for 2 years plus now. There's definitely people using it. Around 220 reproductions have been carried out in all these countries down here. And as we can break it out by claims, 340 claims have been assessed, and a paper could be reproduced more than once, so that's understandable that this would be less than this, and totally 140 papers have been assessed, and this is the current distribution of scores at the paper level. So before ending, let me just walk you through the platform very quickly and show you how to use it. And if people have some questions, please jump in. So here you would land in the SSRP. Here's a little video that shows you in 5 minutes what this all is about. If you here you can search a paper, the DOI or the author name, but also if you do a blank search, it's gonna give you all the reproductions that have been carried out. As you see, a fair amount of reproductions have been carried out. For example, the one on the top here, there's this paper here that has been reproduced 2 times. This one has been reproduced 1 time. And if you click on the last one, it will give you the reproduction title. First, it will give you the title of the paper, the DOI of the paper, the basic information of the paper, but here will show you the basic information of the reproductions. In this case, there's just 1. If you click on the reproduction, it will now, this is a recent improvement that it's basically, it quickly shows like what are the main results. It says that this reproduction assessed 2 claims supported in 6 display items. So they have a fair amount of work here. And the average reproducibility score across these 6 display items is 7. So here you can click here to see more detail, and here you will see that these are the reproducers. And one thing I want to emphasize is that a reproduction can be carried out collaboratively. That's another nice feature that we have. Many people can do a work project and record a reproduction here. This is going to be the digital object identifier that makes this reproducible, this reproduction exercise findable and stable. And here you can click on the claims, on the display items, and down here for each display item is basically saying, okay, and here they broke up apparently the display item table 2 in different sections. So maybe they assess 1 column at a time or something like that, and they provide a score for each section. And then
Fernando.
you can, yes.
So just a clarifying question. So a display item can be anything. So not just a table, but maybe a graph or heat map, whatever they decide to put in their paper can be.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. And yeah, sometimes there might not be even a table or a figure. It can be an inline text that could count here, and you can say this in paragraph 7 or something like that. This sentence is the one that I'm trying to reproduce. And then you go in the scoping section. Here you will see basically we try to provide as many opportunities to reproducers to record all the information that they want. This can be a little bit overwhelming, so that we give maybe too many options for people to record things, and it can be a little bit distracting. But here, for example, they will record the display item, the table, the estimate that they are after, and things like that. If you want to do a more succinct reproduction, you can, I have not even signed it. Here. You can you can start a reproduction. Sorry, this is a feature that it's going to be out soon, but basically you're going to be able to generate a minimal reproduction version. Where you basically, instead of going through many stages, you will have just 1 page where you record this exercise at the paper level, and that way it's a less burdensome exercise.
Quick question, Fernando. So in the chats, we have a question of how does this work with qualitative data?
Yeah. So qualitative data can be a little bit more challenging because basically it is this works with any exercise that you will have a computational exercise, and qualitative data could use basically something like A+TI or other qualitative software, but you need to start from some type of raw data. This could be nodes, or typically it's going to be a rectangular database. And what you would record here, it's basically the process of going from that raw data to a result that will be on the paper. With qualitative data, it is more challenging because these nodes might not be in a standardized way. There might not be a computational process. The computational process might not be scripted. It's just on point and clicks exercise. So in a sense, recording computational reproducibility on qualitative data, it is more challenging, but it is something that people are thinking of. There's an institute on Syracuse University that is thinking, that is basically making progress in terms of qualitative reproducibility. Yes, Pamela, please jump in.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I really did want to hear about how this works with qualitative data, because I believe there is a way you could record your transcriptions, and then the coding, how you derive the coding from it, and how you derive the themes, and how you made decisions about what to record, or what was what was most recurrent in the respondents' responses.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just what I was thinking about. If that kind of data could be there in the system, then maybe somebody could come in and try to reproduce. See, what about if I use the same methods? Do you think I'll get the same responses from this kind of yeah, something like that. That's just what I was thinking.
Yes, yeah. And there, as I said, this group in Syracuse University has done some progress in that space. Also, there's a researcher at University of Southern California that has also done work in this space. Yeah, but no, we haven't gotten a qualitative reproduction on the SSRP. Maybe you could be the first in recording one. So it could be a good test case.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and if I'm finished a little bit early, but if people have more questions, happy to respond. If not, happy to pass it to Leo. Or Grace, if you want an interaction, sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Fernando. And again, we'll be sharing, his slides and this whole recording afterwards. But yeah, I'll pass it to Leo. He's based at the University of Toronto. He is the research assistant on the SSPP team, which he will tell you more about. And yeah, go ahead, Leo. You can feel free to do a larger introduction. They sound very similar in name, but the SSPP is quite different. So I'm excited for you to learn about it as well.
Let me unmute myself first. Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So hi, good morning. So I'm Leo. So I'm here to introduce you to the social science prediction platform. So here's our team members. Our PI Stefano and Eva has been working on projects that improve transparency in social sciences, and we have gathered a good team of people. So let me tell you a bit about our platform and why do we want to do forecasting in social science. So what we do is basically we try to facilitate the systematic collections and assessment of forecast results. So that's basically to collect forecasts before a paper's result is published. So the reason why we want to do this is to gain evidence or gain insights for experimental design. We fight against publication bias, and it also provides some baseline data or ideas for Bayesian analysis. So let me explain a bit more about how are the forecasts used. So the first major reason is to mitigate publication bias. It's common for papers to see null effects and not getting published because it's a null effect and people would assume that this is not interesting. But when in fact, when the academic community consensus is that there is an effect on something and we actually find a null effect, that is actually something that is interesting and that is worth publicating to the public. And then the other issue with publication bias is hindsight bias. It's basically saying that I already knew that results when I saw the results. So having a way to systematically document what people believe and what is the academic consensus before a result is published is very important for researchers to fight against publication bias. For the second point, improving experimental designs, it's common for RCTs and other study to have a lot of different hypotheses that the research team wants to test. And sometimes it's difficult because of financial constraint, resources constraint, or like simply it's not possible to run all the experiments to test all the hypotheses. So running a forecast beforehand, asking about the predictions on different hypotheses could highlight the highest value research questions. For example, some research design hypothesis may be assumed to have very high impacts and you want to test that, or some hypothesis, most people would assume that it doesn't have any impact and you also want to test that. And so that helps you with experimental design. And other way it can help you is to write up your pre-analysis plan. So if you provide more information on like why you are doing this and what is the academic consensus are, it helps to improve transparency in the research design. And finally, for Bayesian analysis, we all know that we need a prior belief. So if we don't have a prior belief, we just assume that the prior belief is like 0 or like null effect, then that may not be so suitable for Bayesian analysis. So that provides an extra source of information for you to do your analysis. So now let me give you some examples of how the results are used. So first, it's an example on sending out short messages, SMS messages to micro entrepreneurs in Kenya. So it's a very recent project we have on a platform. It's still in a working paper by a PhD candidate, but it's a very interesting study. So basically the research questions, or the researcher try to ask the question of how effective are SMS-based business training for the entrepreneurs in Kenya. So he sent out like an SMS message to about 4,700 micro entrepreneurs in Kenya and do an RCDT to test how effective it is. So he asked several questions. First, how many of the entrepreneur remain engaged with the SMS? Because when you subscribe to the SMS, you may not want to read it like you subscribe, like when you subscribe to email newsletter, you may not keep engaging with that newsletter content. So he asked how many of the people or of the entrepreneurs still engage with the SMS. And then second thing is, does the knowledge they gain from the SMS actually improve the adoption of best practices that is proven to be useful in academic literature? And finally, how much does that correlate with sales and profit improvements? So as an example for our prediction exercise, I'd actually like all of the participants to type out your guess on like how many percentage of entrepreneurs still remained engaged with the SMS in the chat, and are there any improvement in sales and profit for the treatment group? %, slight improvement, 30%. Let me wait for 10 more seconds. No effect on improvements. Okay, so here is the result. So first, what the paper found is that the researchers actually overestimated how many people are engaging with the SMS messages. So in the projected sample, we're estimating that there are like about 50% of the participants who still remain engaged with the SMS services. But instead, only about 30% of the respondent in the midline and endline actually still engage with the SMS contents. So that is actually an interesting finding of itself already, because it deviates quite a lot from what the academic consensus are or what the predictions are. And then for the second point, whether there's like an increase in sales or increase in the adoption of knowledge and business best practices, we can see that the expert prediction is actually quite close to the observed midline and endline, although the variance or the standard deviations that the expert predicted is significantly different from the real life observed variance we get. So the point estimate are similar, but in any experiment we cannot confidently reject the null hypothesis that it does not have any effects. But it's interesting here, especially for figure 7, to see how closely the prediction match with the point estimates for both sales and profits. So let me show you another example of why documenting null effects is important. So this is a paper by one of our PIs, Stefano, and his co-authors, Nanos, in 2021 Econometrica. So basically what the paper is trying to understand is, why is there such a difference in average treatment effect between the published nudge papers and the unpublished nudge papers? For the published nudge papers, it's common to see an average treatment effect of 8.682%, which is a huge effect, and it represents a significant breakthrough or significant discovery in how effective the nudge are. But when Stefano and his co-authors try to track down all the nudge experiments that is recorded, he actually find a much smaller average treatment effect, although still a significant effect, but it's much smaller. So this statistics actually shows that there's a bias towards publicating research or result that is significant and that is large in power, and that actually self-perpetuate itself. If the academic consensus already assume that there is a huge effect on a nudge, then finding that a nudge actually has a smaller effect than what it actually is actually makes your paper harder to publish. And it also hinders the process of knowledge generation in doing experiments, because we are not getting the correct or the full spectrum of information we should be getting. So now let me talk about how forecasts should be elicited. So we actually found that there are different ways to collect forecasts. The first, which a lot of people have used, is using slider to collect forecasts. And when you use slider to collect forecasts, we found that the bounds and default position is actually quite important in influencing the final result you get from your forecast. So, okay, I'm sorry. So you can see from the graph on the right here that when we enlarge the forecast from 0.5 SD below 0 to 0.5 above 0 to 1 SD below 0 and 1 SD above 0, we actually get a lot more forecast towards the smaller bound here. So what our previous paper had found is that for slider questions, the bound actually matters, and the default position actually kind of give an anchoring or allow the respondents to infer some information from the bound and default we have set for the questions. So that would actually influence the result we get. So one of the way we have found to mitigate the effect of having different default positions is basically hiding the default positions. So here is an example of one of the surveys that did that before. Yes, no. So here in these surveys, we actually hide the default positions so that the researchers would not have an anchor or have an influence on the prediction they get. But that is still not perfect, because we are still giving the lower bound and upper bound, and that decision is kind of arbitrary.
And just really quickly, Leo, so when you refer to sliders, it's basically, for these surveys where you're going to predict, what I think the effect is, you have an interactive sort of feature where you can literally sort of move and slide along what I think the effect will be.
Yes, exactly. I'm sorry thank you for the clarification.
Just clarifying for myself.
So here it's a slider type questions. So some questions would ask you to predict an effect. So with the slider, you slide around and like choose what do you think the effect size, say here, what percentage did the treated job market candidate receive more job interview here. So it's this. And then.
And Leo?
Yep.
Sorry, do you hear me well?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And another question based on what Grace just asked is, in the default would be for you only to vote at certain levels? What do you mean by defaults in a slider, please?
So for most slider questions, I'll get into more details when we walk through a demo. But for most slider questions, you have a default position for where you want the slider to be at. Say, for example, it could be 0, or it could be some percentage that the control group that represent the control group statistics. Say, for example, 20% of the control group actually take up some sort of programs, and you want to set the default position to that 20% to represent to reflect that statistics. So what I'm referring to is that default position where you set the initial position is important. Yep. So
got it. Thanks.
So what we found is that slider type questions is usually not the best way to generate or it's not the best way to elicit a prediction. A text input is actually more informative in collecting predictions of the forecasters, because it forces them to like think about the actual effect without giving them any anchoring or any inference point they can get. And what the paper also found is that an attention only lasts for about 5 to 15 minutes for our forecaster. Any survey that is longer than that usually would generate poor results. So on that note, we have actually found extra findings regarding our forecast and how to use the forecast. The first is that predictions are generally very accurate in regards to the rank of different policies. Say, for example, you have 2 treatments and you want to compare which one is more effective. The rank is generally more informative or more accurate than the point estimates. We are trying to still find ways to improve how we can get more accurate forecasts for the point estimates, but that research is still ongoing. So when you interpret the results, it's more useful to like look at the rank of the results. Okay, so now that I have motivated you, or like give you some examples of why we should collect forecasts and like how we should collect forecasts, let me introduce you to our platform. So we have collected about 24,000 individual forecasts. We've been supporting project teams to upload their projects to collect forecasts on their studies. So far, we have more than 80 projects across different disciplines in economics and political science, sociology, and psychology on our platform. The platform currently has about 3,600 registered users, including graduate students, faculty members, and other researchers. I'd say the majority of our users are graduate students and the faculty. So that is actually a very good resources of experts, or good group of experts that would help you to collect your forecast for your studies. So far, 5,500 forecasting surveys have been taken to date. Yep. So also we have, in this fall, we have launched a SSPP Super Forecaster panel, which includes more than 90 graduate students, faculty, and academic researchers actively contributing to predictions. And so far, we have collected over 40 predictions from them, and they've been like consistently doing consistently doing the forecast on the platform. So if anyone is interested in using the platform and want to collect forecasts, this is a good time to use the platform. So now let me give you a demo of like how to use the platform. The first step for designing any prediction survey is to design the survey. So we actually recommend you to design the survey in Word document before even starting to do it or code it in Qualtrics. So there are several questions you need to ask yourself. First, what kind of study are you doing? Are you doing an RCT? Are you doing a quasi experiment? Are you doing a lab experiment? Or is it other empirical studies that you are trying to get forecasts on? Depending on that questions, there are different information that you need to provide to a forecaster that would make the prediction informative. Say, for example, in RCT, it's quite important to clearly articulate what is the location, what is your sample, how do you do your randomization method? Are there any like different cluster level within your randomization? How is the treatment delivered? Who delivered the treatment? One example I had was with a project that is trying to deliver a weather forecast for Indian farmers. And the method they deliver the forecast is actually through a very reputable NGOs. So what we knew is that the villagers actually trust the NGO a lot more than they trust the weather forecast. And the weather forecast is effective or is informative mostly because the NGO is providing a lot of information it's having a lot of trust amongst the villagers. So the treatment delivery is important. So let me give you an example of how you want to structure the study. So at first, you want to provide a background description of the study. Here for an RCT, you may want to have an introduction, treatment, study characteristics, target population and sample, how to deliver the treatment, like what I've mentioned, what is the randomization method, any timing, like what's the timing of the study. We know that a lot of RCTs were ran during the COVID-19 pandemic. So has that influenced in any way the delivery of the treatment, or like how does that influence the midline and endline result collection? That is important to also include. Another thing that is important to note in the description of the study is to think about the outcome description. You need to like clearly tell the respondents how you define the outcomes, how do you measure the outcomes. Yep. So
quick question, Leo. Is
yep.
there a risk of giving too much information? Like, is there a balance of, you don't, I don't know, if too much information
yep.
and too many specifics will affect the forecasts in a certain way?
Yes. So most likely we want to keep the survey to be under 15 minutes. So we only like keep whatever information are important for the predictions. So you don't need to include everything if you don't feel like your randomization method is going to like significantly influence the prediction results. But any information you feel like you should disclose to the forecaster for like a more accurate prediction, you should include them. RCTs are generally longer because it's quite context dependent. But for lab experiments, most likely we're getting like less background information on the study. So after you have drafted a description of the study information, you next need to think about what questions you want to ask, specifically what questions you want to ask related to your research studies. In that you may also want to provide some control group statistics. For example, the mean and the standard deviations in the control group. You also want to think about what unit do you want to use for prediction elicitation. Is it a change in percentage point, or is it a change in standard deviation comparing the treatment and the control group? As mentioned before, like estimating the rank is usually more important or more informative than estimating the values. And then, but when you ask questions, it's also important for you to like ask them about a specific estimation value, rather than asking the respondents whether you expect an increase, a decrease, or no effects, because having values is more informative for you to estimate the standard deviations in the predictions and other statistical properties you have. Like what Grace has mentioned, we ideally want to keep the survey under 15 minutes to avoid losing the attention of the respondents. And finally, after you have designed the survey, you have drafted your Google Doc, it's important to check whether you need an IRB approval. Some teams and some institutions would require an IRB. We do have an IRB on our platform, but some university would require additional IRB for the surveys to be posted on our platform. So research teams really have to like check with their institutions, and we cannot provide an answer on like whether you need it or not. By statistics, on average, about half of the team need an additional IRB from their home institutions, and the other half isn't needed. And then the second step of designing a survey would be to code up the survey into Qualtrics. So let me actually walk you through an examples of how that is done. So here I have one of the previous surveys we did for one of the teams. You could go to, so the first thing you need to do is to go to Qualtrics. And then you can log in. You need to create an account. Here I'm logging in with my SSPP account. And you want to create a new project. You want to create a new survey, a blank survey. And like this, then you have a new survey. And first you want to add your background information that you have typed in your Google Doc. So here you just basically copy and paste the background information you already typed up in your Google Doc. Here, I do recommend you to use the rich text editor here, or rich content editor here. Then you can copy and paste everything here. Make sure that it looks good. If you include any link, you need to like relink those links here, and then make sure that the photos or any graphics you put there is correct. And then you also need to like relabel the question name so that you can refer to it in the future. So this is background. Okay. So before that, you may also want to add a block asking for consent. And so here, okay, funny. Why have I lost? I'm sorry. Well, you want to add a consent block. For some reason, oh, now it, okay. Okay, so you want to add a new questions. Most likely the consent question would be the MC questions, whether I agree to participate. I don't. Do you agree to participate? And then you want to put this consent block before the background information. Reduce it to do. And then you want to, after you add the consent block, you want to go to the flow of the logic and then add below an end survey, a branch end survey. If consent to agree to participate is chosen no. And then you're going to move this here. So after that, yes. So after that, you're going to add your questions below your background information description. Here you can add first different text style, text input questions here. For example, what do you expect the treatment effect to be in percentage points? And then for text input questions, it's important to add validations here. For example, the content type here, you want this to be numbers only, and then you can set the maximum, minimum, and the maximum number of decimals here. Again, it's important to clearly label your questions here. So next you have generated like the first questions in your Qualtrics documents. And then you can also add slider, although we have shown that it's not as reliable as text input, but it's still like informative when you want to use it. So you can add another questions. Do you expect the treatment effect to be in standard deviations? And then here you can edit the text. Treatment 2.
And do we typically give any guidelines of like your answer should be within this range?
No. Here what you can do is to define the lower bound and upper bound, but it's really up to the discretions of the research teams. Here, if you're asking about this treatment effect in standard deviations, it's most likely that the standard deviation would be between like -2 and +2. Like a -2 standard deviation change from the control group would be a very, very large effect already. But like it's really up to you to like define where do you want to set the bounds.
Gotcha.
So here you set the bounds. Another thing I also mentioned is whether you set the default position. So here you can set like use custom start positions, and then you can define where do you want the custom positions to be in. You can actually type here as well. So this will be us too.
I think it's not recognizing the plus signal. Maybe try only 2.
I think it's actually my computer with Safari, using Safari to add to this. But anyways, you get the idea. So we want to set the default positions and set the grid lines and the maximum. A tip is to use Chrome instead of Safari, like what I'm using.
And Leo,
Yes.
and a question is, ideally, if we think about the goal of SSPP,
yep.
Our goal would be to circulate the survey among peers that are knowledgeable of the fields of the survey. Like, for example, if it's an education paper, should we try to circulate this more among peers that study education, and the same for health and the same for firms? Or are we trying to get some knowledge from everyone in the field equally?
That's a good question. So I think it's informative to do both. For people who are in the field, they are usually people who know the most about your research. So in the surveys, we actually have questions asking about the field and interests of the researchers. So their responses are informative. But sometimes what we observe is that people who are in the field, because of the publication bias, because of the previous research they've seen that are biased towards a larger effects, their prediction is actually less accurate than people who are also in academia but works in a different field, who has somehow a more objective lens to look at the treatment effect than people who are in the field that the prediction survey is
this by itself,
forecasts
it's very
on.
different, very interesting, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
okay. Thank you.
So if you do the analysis for robustness check, you can try to see whether the forecast is actually different for people who are in the same field compared to people who are outside the field you're collecting. And the fact that most of the respondents are academics and knows the research you're using and know the research design you're using means that you're collecting very high quality results. But those provided forecasts with greater confidence actually sometimes. Yeah, so like what Grace have mentioned in chat. So people who provided forecasts sometimes perform worse when they are in the field. Yep. So next, we talk about changing the variable names. So the next thing we need to think about is whether we want to force the respondent to respond to a question or not. Usually, we don't really like to do that. We want to give the respondents the choice to choose whether they want to complete the questions or not. But we can give them a slight nudge. For example, using the response requirement here, we can add a requirement and request a response from them. So after that, when they do their surveys, if they don't give a response, Qualtrics would kindly nudge them to take the survey. So with the preliminary survey we have created, let's look at the results we have. So first, the first question is, do you agree to participate? In this case, yes. It's loading. Okay, so the background information we have supplied here. You can see first the text inputs, and then second, what do you think is a treatment effect? And then you can see the bounds here. You can add more grid points, say for example, 0.18, 0.16 here, and then you can see the default position here. And then say for example, we don't enter anything. Here is what I meant by nudging people to answer questions. It would ask them to do the questions, but they can still choose to continue without answering. Coming back to the survey design, one other thing we recommend researchers to do is to add a back button. So so if you go to response here, you go to responses. Under this tab, you can add a back button. So when you finish answering the questions, you can go back to the previous questions and look back at the background description, because it's sometimes difficult for like researchers to like remember what they have, remember the research details when they're doing the questions. So finally, let me talk about how do you export the questions you have created from Qualtrics and upload that to our platform. So here you want to click on Tools, go to Export, and then click Export Survey. And then that exported survey would go into your download folder. Next, you would want to go to the social science prediction platform. You want to sign up and create an account here. Here, let me create an account very quick. So I agree, I'm not robots. And then you have created an account. Next, researcher. So next, you want to create your own project on the platform. So how do you do that? As you go to the My Survey tab, and then you can create a new project. Say we are creating a project for the workshop, and then you can add different collaborators. It's important to add the collaborators here, because by adding the collaborators, you're allowing your collaborators to create an account and manage your survey on the platform as well. So here I'll add myself. And then after you create a project, you can create different submissions. By submissions, we mean different surveys. So you can think of a project as a wrapper for different surveys under the same projects. You may have surveys that only target a certain subset of people. You may have surveys that is collected during the baseline, and some surveys you want to collect after you get the end-line data, because you find new interesting discoveries that you weren't seeing or you weren't expecting in the baseline analysis. So here you can create a new submission. It's important to go through the general study information line by line here. And then first you give your survey a title. You can list a bunch of authors here. I'll list myself and PP. You can list the completion time, the expected completion time here. In general, we wouldn't recommend any survey to go beyond 15 minutes, but in some rare occasions, we do have surveys that goes as much as 20 minutes. Here you can set a close date. So generally, we recommend a close date for at least a month to 3 months from the day you upload the survey. So let me set that to like January 1st. Has data been collected? In this case, yes. Are they known to the authors? So this is quite important. If they have not been collected and are not known to the authors, you can choose when do you want the result to be released. You can choose to have your results released after you finish your analysis or before your analysis, so that the result you collect from expert would not potentially affect the research direction you have. Here we say yes, but only to the authors. Has it been pre-registered? Here we are referring to the AEA RCT registry. Here, so if you have an AEA RCT registry for your RCT, we recommend you to put the registration number to the platform. When do you anticipate the result to be known to the team? If you have answered, they are already known to the team, you put the date where you upload the survey. If not, just put the date when you anticipate the result to be known. And then here you put in what discipline it is, what field it is in. This one is in development economics. Location of study. This one is in India. For the abstract, this is. And then next, access restriction. So here, replying to questions by Vivian, you can either restrict it to a specific group of platform users, which you can define at a later stage, or you can open it to any platform user. By opening it up to any platform users, only people who have an account on our platform will be able to use it. So say, for example, if you want to publicize it on Twitter, they would not be able to complete the survey until they create an account. So in general, our suggestions is to open it to the public, because most of the user of the platform are academics. Here, the next box is also quite important. We will add some basic information about the researcher's background, demographic information. For example, whether they are a researcher, whether they are like what field they are in. We'll add those questions to your survey. If you don't want those surveys to be added to your questions, then you need to tick this box. For other things, you can leave them as default. And then here for the AEA RCT registry information, you just copy and paste your registration number here. And then we also ask whether an incentive is provided. So if your survey provide additional incentive for the participants, for example, you incentivize them to provide more accurate responses, then here you would tick yes, and we'll ask you about the details of the incentives. But for our platform have some platform-specific incentives we distribute. Say, for example, to our super forecaster panels, those incentives are distributed by our platform. So you would tick no here if you don't have additional incentive provided by your team. For the contact email, you can just put your email here. And then let me put this one. And then afterwards, you go back to your downloaded QSF file from your Qualtrics, and then you upload it here, and that's done. So afterwards, the platform would ask you to select different key questions. For key questions, it means what is the most important question in your surveys that you're trying to like collect forecasts on. So that wouldn't include any questions related to like the demographic information of the researchers, or like any feedback questions. It's the questions that you want to study for your own research. So here I would add this treatment one here as one of the key questions. You need to give a description on that. It's a treatment effect. It's a and then after you added all your key questions, we would ask you whether you want to add any appended questions. Here, we include questions in such as how confident you are in the study, have the participant conducted any research in the area or in the field that the study is conducting, and any feedback. So if you want to include them, or you just go to the next page. And then your survey is pretty much done. After you submitted your survey into the platform, you can preview it with the preview link here. So just check and make sure that everything looks good. It's appearing the way you're expecting it to appear. Then you can go down to the bottom. Okay, then supposedly you can go down to the bottom, and there's a button that says check for approval. I don't know why our platform is not showing that button yet, but usually there's a button saying that check for approval, and then once you click that, it will send us an email, and then we'll approve that as soon as possible. After you have approved after we have approved the survey, you can publish the survey, and then the survey will be live to everyone who wants to do the survey.
And I'll just add that, Leo gave a really great tutorial here, but our team does do a lot of the support with Qualtrics. So a lot of author teams will sort of just reach out with the Word doc of their study, and our team can program the entire survey for you. We can sort of help with all of the technical things, as long as authors can just provide the context for their study. And you don't need to post a survey to just take them if you're just curious. And, we have, I think, 4 or 5 surveys right now. So you can just go and, see what the different studies are and submit your own predictions as well.
Thanks, Grace. One final thing I do want to mention is that you have the ability to upload, like if there's a list of researchers you want to reach, you can upload that list to our distribution list here. So it will allow you to send email to them and remind them to do the surveys. So that's everything.
Awesome.
So that's the end of the demo. Let me know if you have any questions. I know it's a very long demo, and it may be a bit dry, but I hope that it's informative.
Thanks so much, Leo. And yeah, we'll share the recording, we'll share the slides. You can always email our team directly with any questions, but just want to say thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you for joining the other sessions in this series. As always, we'll send out the recording, but I've sent the link to our playlist, so you can continue to go back to these as well. And just please feel free to reach out to the BITS team for anything you might need support on within your research and open science. So thanks again, Leo, and thank you again, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and have a great holiday season. Take care.